John Hook's Newsmaker starts now.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker. We have, in the past month, been in, and much of the nation has been, in the grips of Powerball mania. Big drawing tonight as well. Arizona in 1994 joined a consortium of states taking part in the multi-state Powerball. The prize tonight approaching $2 billion. The question many ask, where does all the money go? Well, let's start with the winners. They take the cash payout typically. They're advised to do that. That comes out to less than half the advertised prize. $2 billion prize, you might take home $700 million. Depending on your tax rate, the winnings could quickly dwindle down to $550 million. Nothing to sneeze at, don't get me wrong, but it's not exactly $1 billion. And if you win, hire a reputable CPA and tax attorney to guide you through the minefield. The other question is, what about the money that the lottery generates? Where does that money go? Alec Thomson is the executive director of the Arizona Lottery. Alec, you've been on the job about a year and a half, roughly. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, okay, so we've got, you know, with the mandatory federal tax, about 24%. Man, I mean, it goes quickly. It's kind of shocking when you look at it.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, yeah, you know, you see that advertised jackpot, that is real. That is based on annuity, but of course that cash prize is what most people go for, and that would also include taxes, of course.
Okay, if somebody took the annuity where they're getting paid every year for 20 years, what if that person dies? What happens then?
So that annuity would then become part of that individual's estate, and they would have that ability to pass that on to whoever their heirs are.
Okay, so this is why you've got to get estate planning and a CPA. You've got to, I mean, and you've got the money to pay for that. You really need professional help.
Even in these smaller jackpots, right? You want to make sure that you're coming in with a strategy. You know what you're going to do, and while we don't provide that advice, we would recommend that you're working with a professional to make those decisions.
That was my other question. When you finally have a winner come forward, sometimes there's a delay. And we assume they're probably getting advice and trying to kind of circle the wagons and figure out what they're going to do next. If they come in completely stone cold, do you guys tell them, hey, you might want to call a tax professional, you might want to get some financial planning? What do you guide them in any way?
You know, we don't do that. That's not within our purview to give that kind of guidance here. But there are resources available through our associations that we're part of that kind of give that information about best practices if you win. So National Association of State and Provincial Lotteries, for example, they would provide resources and kind of general guidance about what maybe you should consider if you're a winner.
Oh, wow. So you do have services out there that they can go to get some help.
Yeah, and you know, probably just find a reputable, do your research. I think that is probably the most important part. Make sure you're, if it's a large sum of money, you definitely want to talk to a few different entities to make sure that you're finding the right fit for your personal situation.
The best thing for you guys would be to have a big winner say, yeah, I'm going to go public. I'm cool with it. Let's do a press conference. That is the exception rather than the rule.
That's right, especially in Arizona where we do offer that confidentiality, especially for these larger prizes. So, there is public information available for some of the smaller tier prizes, but if you're winning that Powerball jackpot, that would be completely anonymous that you won that prize. So we would not share that information. It would not be public information. That is protected by law. That is a state law that, the legislature passed roughly 10 years ago.
When people come in and they've won a sizable jackpot, are they shell-shocked? I mean, what is the dream can sometimes go south pretty quickly.
I gotta admit, because of that protection, I haven't met many of our high tier winners. I can tell you, I've interacted with a few $1 million winners, $100,000 winner.
If somebody does win and they come in, what is the verification process to make sure they are the winner?
So it is a little bit dictated again by how big that prize is. If you're looking at a Powerball win, if we hit that jackpot, we had a Mega Millions winner back in January, right? That entails a very robust investigation process. So we would be validating that ticket. In some cases, the camera footage might be pulled from the retail location. We want to make sure that the game was sold with integrity and that it's being claimed with integrity to ensure that we're maintaining the integrity of the entire operation from sale to payout.
What happens if it's a group of people who bought a winning ticket? How messy does that get?
A group of people, I haven't experienced one of those myself, but I will say that that does happen. And usually what would happen in that case is you have all of those parties come in and they would all fill out the same forms, go through the same process, and then that money would then be paid out to them based on the number of people.
When it's over, are they still friends?
Oh yeah. Again, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, that's a life-changing moment that you're sharing. So, I hope they stay friends.
It's tricky. Now, you've been on the Lottery Commission, so you've been around this for a while. You were on the commission for how long?
Governor Ducey appointed me to the commission, roughly, I served about 2 years before I took the job 2.5 years ago. So I've been in the lottery world for roughly 5 years. It's been incredible. The stories you see here, the exciting moments that you see here are just really something special. When
you get a Powerball of this size, what does it do to your operation? What do you see as trickle-down effects?
Well, what I'll tell you is I get excited about the influx of people that are getting engaged in the excitement of lottery and the impact of lottery because, as I'm sure you know, as many viewers know, the more lottery tickets we sell, the bigger impact we're able to deliver for Arizona communities. And so seeing our sales spike during a big jackpot run really means that means we're going to deliver even more impact for programs and services we all count on as Arizonans.
Okay, let's talk about that. That's a great segue. People ask, where does the money go that the lottery generates? I understand you guys basically take in almost $3.5 million a week on lottery ticket proceeds.
Yeah, so what that translates to is roughly, over $300 million annually in transfers back to our beneficiaries. And that covers health and human services, environmental conservation, education, and economic development.
So this is a big deal for the state of Arizona in terms of revenue. And you didn't mention, but this is the lion's share of the money from the lottery is $217 million that actually goes to the state general fund. So how is that money spent? The legislature decides?
Yeah, so the legislature defines the waterfall of our 17 beneficiaries. They also would then, once that funding gets to the general fund, they would use it to fund all of these programs and services that we use as Arizonans, from our schools to our roads to infrastructure, health services. It really touches every element of our life here in Arizona.
Okay, so when people are kind of talking around the water cooler about this whole thing, the usual answer is, well, it's going to education. Well, it is, but it's going to higher education, and then if the state decides out of the general fund they want to fund K through 12, that's another matter. But it's interesting, higher education is really top of the heap. Why is that happening when universities have endowments, they've got other sources of revenue? Why do they need this money?
What we're able to do with lottery dollars is empower universities to make transformational projects happen. Take a look at downtown Phoenix. It has completely transformed over the last decade, over the last 15 years, and that was made possible by lottery dollars.
Really?
Because we allow for them to be able to bond against future revenue.
Who made the original call on how we would kind of divvy this up? Higher ed getting $37 million, health and human services getting $35 million, business and economic development $14 million. And then, as I mentioned, the state of Arizona to the general fund, $217 million. Who decided that breakdown? Was that the legislature?
The majority of those beneficiaries are defined by the state legislature and ultimately the governor, should that legislation be signed into law. but also there are a few beneficiaries that are court ordered, for example, that would just apply to one. But the bulk of that money is the flow of that money is dictated by the state legislature.
You know, I remember this debate in the early 80s about whether we should do this or not. There was a worry about problem gambling, that you would feed that. And I see in the funding, the division of problem gambling, you know, it's compared to these other things, it's not a lot, but it is $300,000 a year.
Sure, and you know, keep in mind, we're just one piece of that responsible gambling funding, right? But we are also taking our own initiatives within the lottery to get in front of that problem, to educate our players, to raise awareness about this as a potential concern, and it's printed on every ticket.
So when people say, well, I think it's going to education, they're right about that. Most of it is going to higher ed, 37 million. But as we mentioned in the state general fund, it's 217 million that goes to discretion of lawmakers. And if you figure that half of our state budget goes to K through 12, you've got to assume some of that lottery money goes there anyway.
Yep, exactly. And so, I mean, we really are, and you know, I really do believe this, like we are touching every part of life. Every Arizonan, if you live in Arizona or spend time in Arizona, then you are in some way benefiting from lottery revenue.
So you would say, on balance, this experiment with the lottery that began in the early 80s, I think 81 was the first ticket sold, this has been a success and a win for Arizona.
I do believe so. I mean, we've delivered 5.6 billion in the lottery's history. And, you know, beyond that, we have to keep in mind, too, we're also doing our own outreach in the community. We're also supporting economic development, our retail community, right? This is a huge economic driver, not just because of the lottery revenue, but because of the business that we're driving for our retail partners.
I was curious, you know, there was a discussion a few years ago when all of these games started proliferating. I can't even name them all. But between the scratch tickets and all the drawings, there are a bunch of games. There was a worry at the time that it would dilute the effort. How has that played out?
The more games we offer, the more people we speak to, right? We all have different interests. We all have different things that drive us, that excite us, that make us feel like it's a fun experience.
All those weird games are great stocking stuffers, by the way.
Yeah, always it's holidays are great.
Yes.
Great time to get in on lottery.
Alec, are you allowed to play?
I am absolutely not allowed to play in the state of Arizona. I cannot get in on the Powerball jackpot, unfortunately. No one that lives with me can get in on the Powerball jackpot, so one less person to compete with on that grand prize.
Is that true of everybody that works in that office?
That's true.
Wow.
For everyone that works both for the lottery as well as all of our vendor partners.
Alec Thomson, Executive Director of the Arizona Lottery. Great to see you, Alec. I appreciate it. And continued success. It sounds like things are going extremely well.
Going great. Get out and get your Powerball ticket because you can play.
Okay. Alec Thomson, appreciate it, Alec. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up next on Newsmaker, politicians are calling for an investigation into the management of the Dragon Bravo fire on the North Rim. Coming up next, two reporters from AZ Central who took a deep dive into how this fire went from a managed lightning strike to a massive fire that claimed the historic lodge on the North Rim, the Grand Canyon, 100 more buildings, and it burned 145,000 acres, one of the biggest fires in Arizona history. That's coming up next on Newsmaker. Welcome back to Newsmaker. The Dragon Bravo fire burning on the Grand Canyon's North Rim not only claimed the historic Grand Canyon Lodge there, over 100 buildings as well. But this fire that began as a lightning strike on the 4th of July is now one of the largest fires in Arizona history. It has been charring land for 2 months now. The National Park Service was responsible for managing that fire. But what's becoming clear, while intentions may have been noble to take a natural event, a lightning strike, and manage it, it got out of control and clearly mistakes were made. Fire is an important part of managing the ecosystem, but it can be unpredictable. I talked about this recently on Fox 10 Talks, with Jim Paxson, who became the face of the Rodeo Chediskai fire, another horrible fire back in 2002. Here's what he had to say about fighting fire with fire. We kind of lost our way on managing forest land and where fire is good and naturally occurring. You need fire. It's important, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a huge proponent of prescribed fire. I did a lot of that here on the Gila National Forest, where I was a district ranger for 15 years. But the debate is going to really come to a head because you can't burn to forest health. You've got to do thinning. You've got to cut timber. You've got to have small fires.
I mentioned mistakes were made in managing the Dragon Bravo fire. The governor, our 2 senators, and many others are demanding answers, but we are already getting some, thanks to the reporting of AZ Central's Robert Anglin and Stephanie Murray. They challenged the claim that there was no way to predict this fire would turn into a conflagration and jump containment lines. Anglin and Murray tell me the signs were there and officials downplayed the threats to buildings and public safety. Let me just start with the Park Service was saying that this was just manageable. Everything was working according to plan. But Stephanie and Robert, you have a far different view of what was happening on the ground.
Their own records have a different view. And not only did they say they were handling it, they have now adopted a story about how they were handling it that just doesn't fit the facts. Their own fire records show something completely different.
What did the record show, Steph?
The record showed to us that even as day after day, the National Park Service was telling the public that there was no risk to public safety and that the fire was being handled properly, we looked at the fire management plan where they laid out these key weather points that would indicate that the fire was at risk of spreading. And day after day, the weather got closer to those dangerous points, even as the Park Service was telling people that conditions were totally safe.
So when it started July 4th, it was a lightning strike, and then they decided to treat it as a managed fire. Is that fair to say? And Robert, was that a good or bad decision? I mean, could they have kind of split the difference and said, we're going to manage this, but if we hit certain tripwires, we got to move? And that didn't seem to happen.
No, it didn't. And those tripwires, as you call them, are exactly what the report warns about, that if these weather conditions are met, then you have a greater risk of fire and you need to be taking different steps. They're going to dispute what they call a managed burn. What they're saying is but it's the same thing. They're splitting their hairs over semantics, but they were allowing the fire to burn off the natural resources of the fire. And that's their story. They have since adopted a plan where they're saying, or adopted a position where they're saying, we were suppressing this fire all along.
And you don't think that's true. Stephanie, let me ask you. It looks, based on your reporting, they are saying, the Park Service said that it got away from them on the 11th. That's really kind of the moment it turned. But your reporting suggests that there were warning signs, strong warning signs, on the 9th of July that they had problems.
So as far as July 6th, there were weather conditions that indicated that the fire was at risk of getting away from them. And day after day, they said that they were managing the fire through this confine, contain strategy, allowing it to burn, saying that allowing it to burn would benefit the landscape and the ecosystem of the North Rim. And so although the fire got away from them on the 11th, it was at risk of getting away from them much sooner, especially July 10th, that day before. There are 4 critical thresholds for the weather when things really get risky. They met 3 of them, and the 4th was just 2 miles of wind speed away from meeting that 4th condition on July 10th, the day before they lost control.
Yeah, the Park Service said that unpredictable winds blew the fire out of control. But what did your data reveal, Robert?
Well, the term unpredictable is a misnomer. They could have predicted it. Their fire plan predicted it, and it said it was going to get out of control. Essentially, when these conditions are met, you've got a problem. And what the message that they were sharing with the public was, they had it under control.
Basically, the Park Service said unpredictable winds blew the fire out of control. But what did your data show?
They keep using the term unpredictable, and this fire was absolutely predictable. That's what the data shows, that when these weather conditions were meeting those thresholds, they had a problem and they were ignoring it. Not only that, I would submit to you that the destruction of 100 structures, the burning of the Grand Canyon Lodge, suggests they never had the fire under control.
Should there have been assets at the North Rim Lodge to do structure protection? Because that doesn't seem to have happened either.
That's something that a lot of residents and people who, love and have visited the North Rim many times are asking why there wasn't more done to protect these structures before they burned down. It happened pretty quickly after officials lost control of the fire on July 11th. By the night of July 12th, that lodge was on fire and there was really no stopping it.
The social media that we were getting out of the National Park Service at that time painted a far different picture than what it appears in your reporting of what was happening on the ground. Robert, do you want to take that one?
Well, they paint I think we called it a very sunny picture. Their posts were about the trails. They were about the weather being breezy and light winds, and they had the fire contained for the ecology of the park. They were letting it burn. There were no alarms. They were telling people, in fact, there was no threat to public safety. For days now, they are saying that they approached this fire as in a suppression mode, that they were trying to suppress the fire all the time. But the first time that word suppression is used was 4.5 hours before the Grand Canyon Lodge was a cinder.
So that's kind of the tell right there. I thought it was interesting that the Park Service put out, I thought, a very curious statement saying the fire was expertly handled. If that's expertly handled, I don't know. I don't know what that means.
They say it was expertly handled, but when you look at the weather data from the days before, these warnings were hiding in plain sight. The only place that they didn't appear was on the Park Service own communications.
I asked you earlier, I want to ask it again. Is the Park Service the agency to handle something like this? I know they do fire, but should an incident one team like we've got up there now have been implemented earlier?
This is something that we heard a lot from our sources when we were reporting on this story, is that they were surprised because the Park Service is a respected federal agency, an organization that they thought would be able to handle this fire. A discrepancy that some of our sources pointed out was that some of these plans that they were relying on, they were signed off on in 2025, but a lot of the data and the plans that they were working off of dated back to as far as 2012. So perhaps those plans should have been updated more recently, especially as the weather at the North Rim gets hotter and drier. They brought in an incident management team. They brought in a few rounds of them. They work for around 2 weeks at a time, and then a new one comes in. So they've gone through a few rounds of those interagency management teams.
I want to ask you one more thing. You quote in your story a former Park Service employee, Mark Rose. I thought what he said was very telling. Can you tell me what he told you?
Mark Rose, he used to manage concessions at the North Rim. The house that he lived in, the buildings he worked on, they all burned down. And he said that to him, what happened with the fire wasn't unpredictable. It seemed pretty predictable and exactly what he would expect to happen. And he was surprised to see officials not move in to fully extinguish this fire sooner.
And he said when it gets dry and windy, they let it get away from them. He said these conditions exist all the time. And when the wind kicks up, the fire gets away.
All of the politicians now they want answers. Ruben Gallego, Mark Kelly, Governor Hobbs. What do you think will come of this review?
What's notable to me is that this call for a review is pretty bipartisan. It's rare that you have Governor Katie Hobbs and Congressman Paul Gosar, a Democrat and a Republican, agreeing on something. And what officials have called for is an independent review into the response to this fire. The National Park Service has said the response will be reviewed, but they haven't answered questions on who is going to do that review and whether it's going to be an outside independent group.
Robert, thoughts?
Yeah, one thing that's striking in all of this is the complete, utter silence from the national parks. We went out of our way to make sure they knew exactly what we were talking about, gave them opportunities to address the fire management plan that they weren't following. And all they said was, it's not the right time. Right now, we're concentrating on the fire. And of course, we were asking, shouldn't you have been concentrating on your fire plans all along?
Great reporting. Stephanie Murray, Robert Englund, really appreciate your time and great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're back in a minute on Newsmaker. Thanks as always for watching, and we will see you next week on Newsmaker.